At the edge of two continents, where Europe reaches toward Asia, across a narrow strip of water, where the mountains of Anatolia meet the sea, where empires have risen and fallen since the beginning of recorded time, a young man has a dream. His name is Osman, a chieftain of a small Turkish tribe in the hills of northwestern Anatolia. A man of modest lands and modest power. One of many such chieftains in a fragmented world left behind by the collapse of the Seljuk Sultanate and the fury of the Mongol invasions. In the dream, a tree grows from his chest. Its branches spread across 3 continents. Its roots send rivers flowing in 4 directions. The Tigris, the Euphrates, the Nile, the Danube beneath its shade. People of every language and every faith find rest. Osman wakes and believes. Whether this dream is history or legend, the Ottomans will tell it for 600 years, because it contains the entire story of what they become. An empire that reaches 3 continents, that controls the rivers of the Middle East and the great waterways of Europe. It gathers under its shade dozens of peoples and faiths and languages and calls them all its own. It is approximately the year 1299, and the most enduring empire of the Islamic world has just begun. Tonight, we follow its story from that small chieftaincy in the Anatolian hills to the 600-year span of one of history's greatest civilizations. Slowly, calmly, from the very beginning. Close your eyes if you wish. The dream is beginning. We continue our story. Osman is dead. His son Orhan inherits a principality that is already larger than the one his father found. Bursa has fallen to the Ottomans, a prosperous Byzantine city, now the first capital of an empire still being born. Orhan does something his father could not do. He crosses the water. In 1354, Ottoman forces crossed the Dardanelles, the narrow strait between Asia and Europe, and set foot on European soil for the first time. This is a moment that will change the world. Europe in the 14th century is a fragmented place. Small kingdoms, city-states, feudal lords fighting each other for advantage. The Byzantine Empire, once the greatest Christian state in the world, is reduced to a shadow of itself. Constantinople and a few surrounding lands, surrounded on all sides by powers it cannot resist. The Ottomans move through Thrace, through Macedonia, into Bulgaria, into Serbia, meeting resistance, winning, losing, advancing, always advancing. In 1389, at a field in Kosovo, Sultan Mehmed I meets a coalition of Christian armies, Serbs, Bosnians, Albanians, Hungarians, gathered to push the Ottomans back. The battle is long and brutal at its climax. A Serbian nobleman penetrates the Ottoman camp and kills Mehmed, stabs the Sultan in his tent. But the Ottoman army does not collapse. It rallies. Mehmed's son Bayezid takes command and wins. Kosovo, the Balkans are Ottoman, and they will remain so for 500 years. In our next chapter, the army that won Kosovo is unlike any army Europe has ever faced, a new kind of soldier, born from a system the world has not seen before. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. To understand the Ottoman Empire at its height, you must understand one institution above all others: the Janissaries. In the 14th century, the Ottomans develop a system unlike anything the world has seen, called the Devshirme, the collection. Every few years, Ottoman officials travel through the Christian villages of the Balkans. They select boys, the strongest, the most intelligent, the most promising between the ages of 8 and 18. They take them from their families. These boys are brought to Istanbul. They are converted to Islam. They are educated in language and law, in military arts, in the culture of the empire that has taken them. And then they are trained as soldiers, the finest soldiers in the world. The Janissaries, from the Turkish Yeniçeri, new soldiers. They have no families of their own, no lands, no inheritance, no loyalty to any tribe or religion, except the empire and the sultan. They are the sultan's men, completely, absolutely, and in return, they are fed, housed, paid, elevated above ordinary soldiers, feared by enemies, respected throughout the empire. Some of the most powerful men in Ottoman history begin as Devshirme boys, grand viziers, admirals, governors, men who started with nothing and rose to rule in the Sultan's name. The Janissaries are the iron core of Ottoman military power for 500 years. They win the battles that build the empire. They stand at the walls of Constantinople. They march to Vienna. They hold the frontiers of a world. They are also, eventually, the empire's greatest problem. But that is a story for later chapters. In our next chapter, the Janissaries march toward the most important city in the Christian world. Rest now. The story continues. we continue our story. For 1,000 years, the city has stood. Constantinople, built by the Emperor Constantine in 330 of the Common Era, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, the greatest Christian city in the world, surrounded on 3 sides by water, protected on the 4th by walls so massive, so carefully engineered, that no army in history has ever broken through them. Every sultan since Osman has looked at those walls, has dreamed of what lies behind them, has tried and failed, has died with Constantinople still unconquered. In 451, a young man becomes sultan. He is 19 years old. His name is Mehmed II, and he has thought of nothing else since childhood. He commissions the largest cannons ever built, monsters of bronze, 8 meters long, capable of firing stone balls weighing half a ton. Cannons that take 60 oxen and 400 men to move into position. On the 6th of April, 453, the Ottoman army arrives before the walls of Constantinople. 80,000 soldiers, the largest fleet the Black Sea has ever seen. Inside the walls, 7,000 defenders. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI, knows what is coming. He has asked Europe for help. No help has come. For 53 days, the cannons fire day and night. The great walls crack, are repaired, crack again. On the 29th of May, 453, before dawn, the Ottoman army moves. The walls are breached. Constantine XI removes his imperial regalia, throws himself into the fighting. He is never seen again. His body is never found. By morning, the city is Ottoman. Mehmed rides into Constantinople. He goes first to the Hagia Sophia, the great church that has stood for 9 centuries. He dismounts, he kneels, he takes a handful of earth and pours it over his head in humility before God. And then he gives the order. The Hagia Sophia becomes a mosque. The Byzantine Empire is over. The Ottoman Empire has found its capital. He will be called Mehmed the Conqueror forever. In our next chapter, the conqueror builds a new world inside the walls of the city he has taken. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. Constantinople has fallen. The city that stood for 1,000 years is now Ottoman. Mehmed II is 21 years old. He has accomplished what every sultan before him dreamed of and failed to achieve. He has taken the city that the Prophet Muhammad reportedly said would one day be conquered by a blessed commander with a blessed army. Mehmed believes he is that commander. He does not destroy what he finds. He is not a barbarian in the way his enemies will later paint him. He is a man of the Renaissance, as much as any Italian prince. He speaks 6 languages. He reads Greek and Latin philosophy. He collects manuscripts. He invites scholars to his court. He commissions portraits of himself from Venetian painters. He repopulates Constantinople, bringing in Greeks, Armenians, Jews, offering them protection, guaranteeing their right to practice their faiths. The city that had been a dying Byzantine outpost of 50,000 souls becomes under his rule a vibrant capital of hundreds of thousands. He begins to build Topkapi Palace high on the hill above the Bosphorus, looking out over 3 seas, the center of Ottoman power for the next 4 centuries. He sees himself as more than a Muslim sultan. He sees himself as the heir of Rome, of Caesar, of Constantine, the ruler of the world's center, the place where East meets West, where continents touch. He continues to conquer Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, the Aegean Islands, the Crimea, reaching toward Italy before his death stops him short. He dies in 1481, at 49 years old, on campaign, always on campaign, still reaching for more. In our next chapter, his grandson takes the throne and turns the empire's eyes to the south, to the Arab world, to the heartland of Islam. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. There are rulers who are remembered for what they built. There are rulers who are remembered for what they destroyed. And there are rulers who are remembered for what they transformed. Selim I belongs to the 3rd category. He comes to power in 1512, not peacefully. He deposes his own father. He executes his brothers and his nephews, every potential rival, every challenge to his throne. Gone. The Ottomans call him Yavuz Sultan Selim. Selim the Resolute, history in the West calls him Selim the Grim. Both names are accurate. He rules for only 8 years, but in those 8 years, he doubles the size of the empire. He turns east first to face the Safavid Empire of Persia, a Shia Muslim power that Selim, a Sunni, considers a theological enemy as much as a political one. At the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, his cannons defeat the Safavid cavalry, and the Ottoman border moves east. Then he turns south to the Mamluk Sultanate, the great power of Egypt and Syria, who control the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. In 2 campaigns, in 1516 and 1517, he destroys the Mamluk state entirely. Syria falls, Palestine falls, Egypt falls. And with Egypt comes something more valuable than any territory. The caliphate, the spiritual leadership of Sunni Islam, the last Abbasid caliph, living under Mamluk protection in Cairo, transfers the title to Selim, The Ottoman Sultan is now the Caliph, the commander of the faithful, the guardian of Mecca and Medina, the spiritual leader of the entire Sunni Muslim world. He dies in 1520, before he can turn west and continue his conquests. He leaves to his son the largest and most powerful Muslim empire in the world. His son's name is Suleiman. In our next chapter, that name echoes across the centuries. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. It is 1520. Selim the Grim is dead. His son inherits the most powerful empire in the Islamic world, and one of the most powerful in the entire world. His name is Suleiman. He is 26 years old, tall, slender, thoughtful. A man who reads poetry and writes it, who speaks multiple languages, who has studied law and administration, with the seriousness of someone who intends to be great. He will reign for 46 years, the longest reign of any Ottoman sultan. And under his rule, the empire reaches the height of its power, its greatest extent, its brightest moment. His subjects call him Kanuni, the lawgiver, because he creates a unified legal code for a vast and diverse empire. A system of laws that treats the empire's many peoples with something approaching consistency and justice. The Europeans call him the Magnificent, because from outside what they see is splendor. The richest court in the world, the most powerful army, the fleets that dominate the Mediterranean. He conquers Belgrade in 1521, Rhodes in 1522. He defeats the Kingdom of Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs in 1526. The Hungarian king dies in the battle. His kingdom becomes Ottoman. He builds the Suleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul, designed by the architect Sinan, one of the greatest buildings ever constructed, still standing, still breathtaking, on the hill above the Bosphorus, where it has stood for nearly 5 centuries. He is a poet. He writes in Persian and Turkish, under the pen name Muhibbi, the loving one. One of his verses has become a Turkish proverb. Everyone aims at the same meaning, but many are the versions of the story. In our next chapter, the magnificent Sultan marches west to the gates of the world he wishes to conquer. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is the spring of 1529. Suleiman the Magnificent leads the largest army the Ottoman Empire has ever assembled westward through Europe. Hungary has fallen. Belgrade has fallen. The kingdoms of Central Europe look at the approaching army with fear. Suleiman marches toward a city that sits at the heart of Christian Europe, the capital of the Habsburg Empire, the seat of the Holy Roman Emperor, Vienna. If Vienna falls, the road to the rest of Europe lies open. France, Germany, Italy. Everything the Christian world has built since the fall of Rome lies within reach of the Ottoman advance. The siege begins in late September. The Ottoman cannons open fire. The walls of Vienna shake and crack. The defenders inside number barely 16,000. The Ottoman army surrounds them completely. And then the weather turns. Rain, cold mud, the kind of autumn that turns the roads of Central Europe into rivers of clay. The enormous Ottoman supply train cannot keep up. The heavy siege cannons have been left behind. The army is not equipped for a winter campaign this far from Istanbul. Suleiman makes a decision that will echo through history. He withdraws. The city holds not by its walls alone, but by the calendar, by the rain, by the distance from Istanbul to Vienna. He will try again in 1532. He will reach the gates and turn back again. Vienna will remain unconquered, the western limit of what the Ottoman Empire can reach and hold, the line beyond which the dream of Osman cannot extend. In our next chapter, inside the palace walls, a woman changes everything. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Behind the walls of Topkapi Palace, beyond the Great Gate, and the second courtyard and the third, there is a place that very few people are permitted to enter. The harem. In Ottoman tradition, the harem is not merely what later Western imagination has made it. It is the private household of the sultan, a world unto itself with its own hierarchy, its own politics, its own power. And in the 16th century, at the height of Suleiman's reign, a woman in that world changes the empire in ways that no army and no conquest ever could. Her name in Ottoman records is Harem Sultan. The Western world calls her Roxelana, a Slavic girl. Born in what is today Ukraine, taken as a slave in a Crimean raid, brought to Istanbul, to the palace, to the harem. What happens next is unlike anything in Ottoman history before her. Suleiman, who is expected to never marry a concubine, marries her. She becomes his legal wife, his partner, his confidant. The woman he writes poetry to, whose letters he carries on campaign, whose absence makes the great sultan write words like, "My Istanbul, my Karaman, my earth and my sky." She is not merely beloved, she is powerful. She has her own income, her own charitable foundations, her own correspondence with foreign rulers. She influences appointments. She shapes decisions. She engineers the fall of Suleiman's oldest friend and most powerful minister, Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, who had been closer to the Sultan than any person alive. She has him executed. She will also be suspected of convincing Suleiman to execute his own son, Mustafa, the most capable of his heirs, to clear the path for her own sons. Power in the Ottoman Empire is never only military, it is always also personal, and no one understood this more completely than the woman history remembers as Roxelana. In our next chapter, the magnificence begins to fade, and a long, slow twilight begins. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. Suleiman the Magnificent dies in 1566 on campaign in Hungary at the age of 71, still moving, still reaching, as he always had. He leaves behind an empire of 5 million square kilometers, 25 million people, 3 continents, the most powerful state in the Islamic world, one of the most powerful in the entire world. And he leaves behind a problem that no sultan will ever fully solve. How do you follow the magnificent? The sultans who come after Suleiman are not Suleiman. Some are capable, some are weak, some are cruel, some are simply unlucky. But none of them possesses the combination of military genius, administrative intelligence, and personal authority that made Suleiman what he was. In 1571, at the Battle of Lepanto, in the waters off Greece, the Ottoman fleet is destroyed by a Christian alliance. The first major Ottoman naval defeat in a century, a sign that the sea is no longer automatically Ottoman. In 1683, the Ottomans lay siege to Vienna for the second time. For 2 months, the city holds, and then a combined force of Polish and Habsburg armies arrives, and the Ottoman army breaks and runs. This is the moment historians mark as the beginning of the end, the high water mark of Ottoman expansion in Europe. After 1683, the tide only goes one way. In 1699, the Treaty of Karlowitz, for the first time in Ottoman history, the empire gives back territory it once took. Hungary, Transylvania, Podolia, gone. The word begins to spread through European courts, through diplomatic dispatches, through the private letters of ambassadors and ministers. the Ottoman Empire is weakening. In our next chapter, a brief and beautiful pause in the decline. When the empire tries to learn from the West that is surpassing it. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. It is the early 18th century. The Ottoman Empire has been in retreat. Vienna twice unconquered, Hungary lost. The borders slowly contracting under the pressure of a Europe that is changing faster than the empire can follow. And then, for a brief moment, something softer begins. The period historians call the L'Île-d'Ivry, the Tulip Era, from 1718 to 1730, a time of peace, of tentative curiosity about the world outside the empire. The Grand Vizier is Ibrahim Pasha, not the Ibrahim who served Suleiman, a different man, a man of culture and refinement who believes the empire can learn from Europe without becoming Europe, who sends ambassadors to Paris and Vienna, not just to negotiate, but to observe. What do they have that we do not? How do they build? How do they print books? How do they organize armies? How do they think? The first printing press in the Ottoman Empire prints books in Turkish during the Tulip Era, centuries after Gutenberg. But it arrives. Gardens fill with tulips, the flower that the Ottomans had introduced to Europe a century earlier, now blooms extravagantly in the gardens of Istanbul. Festivals are held by candlelight. Poets write music plays, the court relaxes into something approaching joy. It ends in 1730, a rebellion, common people and soldiers angry at the extravagance, at the distance between the court and the reality of empire. Ibrahim Pasha is executed. The Sultan abdicates. The tulips keep blooming. The problems do not go away. In our next chapter, the empire attempts something more serious than tulips. It attempts transformation. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The 19th century arrives, and with it, a world the Ottoman Empire does not recognize. Europe is industrializing. Factories, railways, telegraphs, steam engines and iron ships, armies equipped with rifles that fire faster and farther than anything the Janissaries carry, sciences and philosophies that challenge every old certainty. And nationalism, the most dangerous idea the 19th century produces, the belief that people who share a language and culture deserve their own state, their own borders, their own flag. For an empire that governs Greeks and Armenians, Arabs and Bulgarians, Serbs and Albanians, Jews and Kurds, Nationalism is not an idea. It is a slow catastrophe. In 1826, Sultan Mehmed II does something extraordinary. He destroys the Janissaries, the force that has been the spine of Ottoman military power for 5 centuries. Grown conservative, corrupt, more dangerous to the Sultan than to the empire's enemies. Mehmed uses his artillery. The Janissary barracks are shelled, thousands die or flee. The institution that won Kosovo and stood at the walls of Vienna is abolished in a single day. And in 1839, his son Abdul Mecid issues the Tanzimat decrees reorganization, a sweeping set of reforms, equality before the law for all subjects, Muslim and Christian and Jew alike, modern courts, modern schools, a modern army. It is an empire trying to save itself by becoming something new. Some of it works, some of it comes too late, some of it creates new tensions, even as it resolves old ones. In our next chapter, the world gives the Ottoman Empire a name, and the name is not kind. Rest now, the story continues. We continue our story. Around 1853, Tsar Nicholas I of Russia uses a phrase in a diplomatic conversation with the British ambassador. He calls the Ottoman Empire the sick man of Europe. The phrase spreads through newspapers, through diplomatic cables, through the drawing rooms of European capitals, because it captures something everyone already knows, but no one has said quite so bluntly. The empire is in trouble. Greece has won its independence in 1821, after a revolution that captures the imagination of romantic Europe. Poets and painters rush to fight for the Greeks. Byron dies there. Serbia has won autonomy. Egypt has become effectively independent under its own ambitious governor. Algeria has been taken by France. The Balkans simmer with nationalist movements that the empire cannot suppress and will not tolerate. The treasury is empty. The empire borrows money from European banks, then borrows more again, until the interest payments consume 1/3 of state revenues. In 1853, Russia goes to war with the Ottomans again, as it has repeatedly throughout the century, each war costing the empire more territory, more prestige, more strength. Britain and France come to the Ottoman side, not out of love, but because they fear a Russian empire that reaches the Mediterranean, the Crimean War. The Ottomans win with help, and the winning changes nothing fundamental about what they are. A great empire in the slow process of becoming something smaller, something that the world watches with a mixture of fascination and calculation, waiting to see what remains when it finally ends. In our next chapter, a generation of young men decides it will not wait. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is the late 19th century. Sultan Abdul Hamid II sits on the throne of Osman. He is intelligent, suspicious. A man who has watched the empire shrink throughout his life and has concluded that the answer is control, absolute control of information, of dissent, of every corner of the palace and every province of the empire. He suspends the constitution. He dissolves the parliament. He rules by decree and secret police and an elaborate network of informers. And he creates, by his repression, exactly what he fears most: opposition. Young men, educated in the new schools the Tanzimat reforms created, who have read European philosophy, who know what a parliament is, who believe the empire can only survive if it modernizes, truly modernizes, not just builds railways and drills new armies, but changes how it governs, who it listens to, what it believes about itself. They organize in secret, in Paris and Thessaloniki, in the army itself. They call themselves the Committee of Union and Progress. The world calls them the Young Turks. In 1908, military units in Macedonia revolt. They demand the restoration of the constitution, the reinstatement of parliament. Abdul Hamid concedes. He has no choice. The army is with the Young Turks. The constitution is restored, parliament meets again. The empire celebrates in the streets of Istanbul. People who have not been allowed to speak freely for decades suddenly speak. It feels like a new beginning. It is not a new beginning. It is the beginning of the end, moving faster now than anyone expected. In our next chapter, the empire makes its last and most catastrophic choice. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. It is the summer of 1914 in Sarajevo. A young man fires a pistol and the world catches fire. The great powers of Europe tumble into war. Austria-Hungary against Serbia, Germany against France and Russia, Britain against Germany. Alliances pulling every major power into a conflict no one fully intended and no one can stop. The Ottoman Empire watches and must decide. The men who govern the empire in this final chapter are the Young Turks, the Committee of Union and Progress, 3 men at its center: Enver Pasha, Talat Pasha, Semel Pasha. They are nationalists, they are modernizers, they are also desperate, and they make a desperate choice. They join the war on the side of Germany. Their reasoning is not without logic. Germany is the most powerful military force in Europe. If Germany wins, the Ottomans might recover. Territories lost to Russia might rebuild the empire's strength, might reverse the long decline. The gamble fails. The Gallipoli campaign, a British and Allied attempt to knock the Ottomans out of the war by forcing the Dardanelles. The Ottomans hold, hundreds of thousands die, on both sides, on cliffs above the sea, in trenches cut into rocky soil, in a campaign that defines the national memory of Australia and New Zealand to this day. But on other fronts, the empire crumbles. The Arab lands revolt. The Russian army advances in the east. The British move through Palestine, through Mesopotamia. In 1918, Germany surrenders, and with it, the Ottoman Empire. The gamble has failed completely. The empire has lost everything it bet. In our next chapter, in the darkness of that defeat, something unspeakable happens. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. There are events in history that must be spoken of with great care, with precision, with honesty. Even when the facts are painful, even when they remain contested. This is one of those events. The Armenians are an ancient people, Christian with their own language, their own church, their own culture. Living for centuries in eastern Anatolia as subjects of the Ottoman Empire. By the late 19th century, relations between the Ottoman state and its Armenian subjects have become deeply strained. The empire is contracting. It is fearful, suspicious, nationalist in a new and dangerous way. Some Ottoman officials view the Armenian community as a potential fifth column, as aligned with Russia, as a threat to the empire's survival. In 1915, during the chaos of World War I, the Young Turk government issues orders for the deportation of the Armenian population of eastern Anatolia. What follows is documented by diplomats, missionaries, journalists, and survivors. Armenians are removed from their homes, marched into the Syrian desert, killed on the roads, in ravines, in rivers, burned in buildings, drowned, shot, starved. The number of dead is estimated by most scholars at between 600,000 and 1.5 million people. Many governments and scholars call this a genocide, the deliberate attempt to destroy a people. The Turkish government contests this characterization, acknowledging deaths occurred, but disputing the intent and the numbers. This debate continues today. It is painful. It is unresolved. It involves the deepest questions about memory, responsibility, and what nations owe to the past. What is not disputed is that an ancient people was devastated, that hundreds of thousands of men and women and children lost their lives in circumstances of extraordinary suffering. We record this because history requires it. In our next chapter, the empire faces another kind of fracture from within its Arab lands. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The Arab world has been part of the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, since Selim the Grim conquered Egypt and Syria in 1517. For 4 centuries, Arab lands have been governed from Istanbul. Arab soldiers have served in Ottoman armies. Arab scholars have taught in Ottoman schools. Arab merchants have traded under Ottoman protection. But the relationship has never been simple. The young Turks who now govern the empire are Turkish nationalists. They speak of a Turkish identity, of Turkish culture, of Turkey. And the Arabs of the empire hear in this something troubling, that they are subjects, not partners, that their language and their history and their identity are lesser things. In 1916, Sharif Hussein of Mecca, the guardian of Islam's holiest city, a man of impeccable religious credentials, raises the flag of revolt. The Arab revolt begins. It is encouraged and supplied by the British, who see in it a way to weaken the Ottoman Empire from within, who make promises to the Arabs about independence after the war, promises that will prove more complicated than they appear. A young British officer named T.E. Lawrence rides with the Arab forces through the desert, blowing up railway lines, attacking Ottoman garrisons, becoming, in his own telling, a legend. The Arab revolt does not win the war alone, but it opens the Ottoman southern front. It ties down troops. It accelerates the collapse of Ottoman authority in Syria and Palestine. And it plants the seeds of a question that the Middle East is still asking today. Who does this land belong to? Who made the promises? And what do promises mean when empires fall? In our next chapter, the empire falls, and a sultan boards a ship in the night. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The war is over. The Ottoman Empire is on the losing side. Allied warships sit in the Bosporus. Foreign soldiers walk the streets of Istanbul. The city that Mehmed the Conqueror rode into triumphant in 453 is now occupied. In 1920, the victorious powers present the Ottoman government with the Treaty of Sèvres. It is not a peace, it is a dismemberment. Anatolia itself is to be divided. Greece receives the western coast. Armenia receives the east. France and Italy receive zones of influence. The Kurds are promised a homeland. The Straits are internationalized. What remains of the empire is barely a state at all. The Sultan signs he has no choice. His government controls almost nothing. His army is defeated. His capital is occupied. But somewhere in Anatolia, in the city of Ankara, someone refuses to accept this. A general, a man who fought at Gallipoli, who held the lines when everyone else was breaking, whose name the soldiers already know and trust. His name is Mustafa Kemal. He convenes a grand national assembly in Ankara. He declares that the government in occupied Istanbul does not represent the Turkish people, that the fight is not over, that Anatolia will not be divided. For 3 years, his forces fight against Greek armies pressing from the west, against Armenian forces in the east, against the terms of the treaty that the world has imposed. And he wins. On the 1st of November 1922, the Grand National Assembly in Ankara abolishes the Sultanate. 623 years of Ottoman rule gone in a vote in a provincial city that was not even the capital. On the 17th of November, the last Sultan, Mehmed VI, boards a British warship in the dark of early morning. He carries little with him. He looks back at the city his ancestors built and leaves. No one comes to say goodbye. In our next chapter, from the ruins of an empire, a new country is born. Rest now. The story continues. We continue our story. The Sultanate is abolished. The last Sultan is gone. The Allied powers occupy Istanbul. The Treaty of Sèvres has divided Anatolia on paper. But paper is not the same as land, and a general in Ankara is proving this, one battle at a time. Mustafa Kemal, born in Thessaloniki in 1881, a city that was Ottoman when he was born and Greek when he died. He is a soldier of exceptional ability at Gallipoli when British forces threatened to break through to Istanbul. It was Kemal who held the line, who told his men, "I am not ordering you to attack. I am ordering you to die. In the time that passes until we die, other troops and commanders can come and take our places." They held. Now he is fighting a different kind of battle, not to hold an empire, but to save a nation. His forces drive the Greek army from western Anatolia. They push back the Armenian forces in the east. They negotiate the withdrawal of Allied troops from Istanbul. In 1923, the Treaty of Lausanne replaces the Treaty of Sèvres. Anatolia is Turkish. The borders of a new country are recognized. On the 29th of October 1923, the Republic of Turkey is declared. Mustafa Kemal becomes its first president. And then he does something no one fully expected. He does not merely replace the Sultan with a president. He replaces the Ottoman world with something entirely new. The Arabic script is replaced with the Latin alphabet. The Islamic calendar is replaced with the Gregorian. The religious courts are closed, the fez is banned. Women are given the vote. Education is secularized. The caliphate is abolished. He takes a new name. The parliament gives it to him, Atatürk, father of the Turks. He dies in 1938, at 57 years old of liver disease, in the Dolmabahce Palace on the Bosphorus. At the exact moment of his death, all the clocks in the palace are stopped at 9:05 in the morning. Many of those clocks still show that time today. In our final chapter, we look back across 6 centuries of Ottoman history and ask what it left behind. Rest now, the story continues. We arrive at the end of our story. The Ottoman Empire is gone. The sultanate abolished. The last sultan vanished into exile. The caliphate ended. The old world dissolved into the new. What remains? Look at a map of the Middle East, the borders of Iraq and Syria, of Lebanon and Jordan, of Palestine and Israel, of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. These lines were drawn in the aftermath of the Ottoman collapse by British and French diplomats who divided what the Ottomans left between themselves, with consequences that reverberate to this day in every conflict, in every border dispute, in every question about who belongs where and why. Look at the cities. Istanbul, still one of the great cities of the world, where the mosques of Sinan still rise above the Bosphorus, where the Topkapi Palace still looks out over 3 seas, where east and west still meet at the crossing of 2 continents. Cairo, Damascus, Baghdad, Jerusalem, Beirut, Algiers, Sarajevo, all shaped by centuries of Ottoman governance, Ottoman architecture, Ottoman law and custom and cuisine and language. The food of the Middle East and the Balkans, kebab and baklava and coffee. The Ottoman Empire introduced coffee to Europe in the 16th century. The coffee house, the place where people gather to talk and argue and think. This is an Ottoman gift to the world. The millet system, the Ottoman practice of allowing minority communities to govern their own affairs, their own courts, their own schools, their own religious life. Imperfect, unequal, but present. A model of managed diversity that the modern world is still struggling to improve upon. 600 years, 3 continents, 36 sultans, dozens of peoples and faiths and languages living under one shade. Like the tree in Osman's dream. Tonight we have followed that dream together from the hills of Anatolia in 12299 to the shores of the Bosphorus in 1922. From a small chieftain's vision to one of history's greatest empires, and back to silence. Now rest. The story has been told. Sleep well.